Whakatakatahau ki te uru, whakatakatahau ki te taonga, ki mā kina kina, ki uta, ki mā taratara ki tai. Ihi aki ana te tatakura, i tio, i huka, i hauhu, tihei mauri ora.
Ai mihi atu kia koe e te whaikauni hera Greg Burns mō tō Karakia Timatanga. Ko tēnei Karakia, ko tēnei mihi e hui hui e takata. Ko reira e mihi atu kia koutou tēnā rā koutou nā pō waitaka o tō tātou matua tipuna. E mihi atu o te tiriti partner mai haere mai hoki o te tepu o te kauni hera taio o Waitaha. Nō reira, e mihi atu kia koutou o te mana whenua, o te pātawhi tō te kohaka kaikai a waro, mō marumaru a moka tere, moka whakaruru hau o nai tua huriri. Nō reira, e nā mate. E nā mate, ka maumaharatia e nā mate. Ka maumaharatia mō tō whanaunga o rāpaki o te raki whakaputa, o te whanaunga o te taumutu, e te whanaunga o kaitahu ka te mamoi Waitaha. E haere atu rā e Flora Annie Mamairo McGregor. Mō whānau tau, mō whānau Briggs. E nō reira e Flo, e haere atu rā. E haere atu rā ki te pāta whakawairua, e takoto, takoto, takoto. Takoto i rangimari i rungi tō waka, hoi atu tō waka ko tuatarai haere, haere, e haere atu rā. E whanaunga, e Flo, e te raka tira whaia o hene hau, rāpaki o te raki whakaputa takiwā, o te pātaka o rākai hautu takiwā, o reira e haere atu rā. Haere atu rā e Hawaiki nui, Hawaiki ro, Hawaiki pamamo. E nō reira, e te whānau pani, kia kaha, kia maia, kia manua nui, o rāpaki o te raki whakaputa, mō tō tangihanga o nehu, o reira, koutou, a tēnā koutou, e mihi atu, e mihi atu. Āpiti hono tātai hono, rātou ki te honga mate ki a rātou. Āpiti hono tātai hono tātou, ki te honga ora ki a tātou. O reira, I was just in my mihi, particularly to acknowledge mana whenua nai tua uriri, to acknowledge our te tepu, our table here, and also manuhiri to this council. Visitors want to acknowledge and welcome you. My last acknowledgement actually was a purapura aki, or a farewell, to someone who actually has given her whole life to the community of Littleton, Rāpaki, Whakaropo and Naito, and particularly in sport, South Island Māori basketball, rugby league and Littleton. And Flora actually, just her whakapapa, also acknowledges this person and the contribution that she has made, but also her whānau as well. You see, Flora, is the granddaughter of Dolly and George Briggs. Aunt Dol, her late grandmother, was the daughter of Reihana Tau from Rāpaki and Parara Nutira from Taumutu. Her grandfather was Uncle George Briggs, and he was the former mayor of Littleton from 1948 to 1959, and then from 1965 to 1968. Her mother, Waikura Briggs McGregor, and her dad, John McGregor, Tūturu Scottish, the combination of Naitohu and Scotland. Actually, then coming from Auntie Sissy, her mother, she was actually the father of George Briggs, Uncle George, the mayor. She became a councillor for the Littleton Borough Council. She was a real wahine tō. She fought for everyone. And at her tangi at Rāpaki, who could stop the whole port of Littleton and all the ships inside the port that were moored there. And they actually blew their horns in acknowledgement of what this woman had done and her whānau. So we're acknowledging over the next 3 days at Rapaki, the daughter of this distinguished family who gave everything. She actually was so involved with the Littleton community, and also she was Rapaki's representative to our organising committee for Sale GP. She did it with passion, and she did it actually under the mana that which she was mandated to do, but all for her people and the wider community of Whakaropo. So I just wanted to acknowledge her today at the beginning of this meeting. There's people like that actually who give so much to the community, but they so far under the radar. And it's Flo, it's your time to be acknowledged. I do this today as a Ikan Haitohu councillor. Mihi. Thank you. Kia ora.
Yeah, kia ora, Nook. And can I ask that you pass our condolences on to the whānau? And thank you for that. It was, it's good to know that. It's good to know those stories of those people that mean so much in communities, and especially those people that work like we do for communities and the efforts that they're put in. So sad passing, but well acknowledged by you, and we will note that in the minutes, Councillor Karakia. Okay, so the main body of the meeting now. This is the 565th council meeting of Canterbury Regional Council. I've been informed there is a quorum, and it's actually really good to know that we've got at least 15 of our 16 councillors in the room, and we've got Councillor Southworth online. So there's no apologies from councillors, and so we'll move to item 3, which is conflicts of interest. Now, there are some conflicts of interest in terms of the business that we have to conduct today. We need to make a decision on Plan Change 7 to partially adopt Plan Change 7. I have a conflict with that, which I've declared all through the PC7 process with this council, having been a shareholder within the Operative water scheme in South Canterbury, where PC7, the southern part of PC7 was being done. So I will handle the chair when we get to PC7 to Deputy Chair Craig Pauling, and he will conduct that. I've been advised there are other conflicts. If councillors would like to declare them themselves, that would be great.
I have a conflict.
Great. Councillor Southworth.
Yeah, I was advised I had a conflict when I first joined Environment Canterbury at the start of last term. It's a really, really minor and possibly not a conflict at all, but it's not worth the risk in this case, so I will declare a conflict. Thank you.
Councillor McKay.
I will be standing back for item, whatever it is, 8.2.
I'll be standing back as well.
Great. Councillor Ward has also got his hand up for a conflict. Anybody else? Okay, thank you for that. Yes, if we move to item 4, we have 2 public sessions today. The first of those is from Forest and Bird, and it's going to be presented to us by Tom Kay, and joined by Nikki Soinick. And Nikki, as a visitor here, we've seen you in here a few times, Nikki, so nice to see you. Welcome. So if you can come up to the table now. Tom is representing Royal Forest and Bird with Nikki, and talk to us today about natural-based solutions to the impact of climate change. I've already had a discussion with Tom about the information he sent to us, which is considerable. And councillors, it is available for councillors to go through if they need to, and some really good, great photographs in that. I think you're aware, Tom and Nikki, that it's a 10-minute slot. We'd like to have opportunity to ask questions of clarification at the end of that. And so once you're set up down there, we can make a start. Sorry, Tom, the only other thing you have to worry about is that button here. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much. Kia ora, everyone. My name is Tom. I work for Forest and Bird as a freshwater advocate, as you've heard. I've got a lot of information to go through, so I'm going to rip straight into it. And then, I'm from Hawke's Bay. I grew up in Hawke's Bay, but I live in Wellington, and I work there. I'm based in Wellington. But on the 14th of February, when the cyclone was hitting Hawke's Bay and Tairāwhiti region, I was watching what was happening in Hawke's Bay really closely. I wasn't there. I was in Wellington, But in particular, I was watching the Tutaikuri River flow gauge because the river was flowing at over 1,800 cubic meters per second. So 1,800 tons of water going past the point every second. It's the highest flow recorded on that river, probably got higher. I was refreshing the regional council flow gauge because I wanted to know if the river was rising or not, because my family still lives downstream from that flow gauge. They live about 600 meters from the river, 2 different houses, the house I grew up in and my sister with her, or my niece and nephew, 3 and 5-year-old, behind that stop bank. At about 8 o'clock, that river overtopped the stop banks. The gauge had failed. I couldn't pick up anything from the data, not that it would have helped me. And it took out the substation there at the top of the image. At about 10 o'clock, everyone in the suburbs nearby, including my family in Taradale, were told to evacuate. That's Waiheke in the middle of the picture and Taradale at the top of the image there. The river overtopped the stop bank on both sides, or went through a gap on Waiheke side, over the top on the Taradale side, and started spilling into the streets, including my sister's street there on the left, and those other streets there on the way to my parents' house. They evacuated, left the suburb, were allowed back later that day. Thankfully, their houses were okay. But others, of course, in the region, not so lucky. They had 6.5 days without power with a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, but they were lucky compared to others. The bridge down the road from them was taken out at Redcliffe. You've probably seen the photos. Further upstream, the whole valley and Dartmoor, Puketapu area was basically flattened. Of course, places like Pakowhai, water came over the stop bank and backed up behind other stop banks. It got so deep that it overtopped the stop bank and went back into the river to drain. People rescued off their rooftops. 5.5 meters of floodwaters in that area. While it was the most extreme event we've had recently, it's not the only one. 2 weeks before that, we had flooding in Auckland. Just before that, we had flooding in Nelson months before. Tairāwhiti hit regularly. Westport and the West Coast hit regularly. Canterbury hit regularly. 2019, 2021 with the Ashburton Hakatere River. And places like Edgecombe, Manawatu, Whanganui all hit. Dr. Sam Dean from NIWA said after the event, I have no doubt in my mind that climate change has influenced that event. And Met Service said these events will become more severe as the planet continues to warm. That will mean heavier rain and more problems from flooding. But it's not just climate change that's influenced these events, it's also the way we've mismanaged the environment. Things like wetland clearance. This is a map of predicted historic wetland across the Canterbury region. You compare that to what we've got left, pretty much nothing left. We've taken 90% of the wetlands out of our landscape. Same thing with forests. On the left there, you've got pre-human forest cover, that big image there, current forest cover. We've stripped forest off the hillsides, off floodplains, and where we've kept those forests, we've introduced pests, rats, stoats, possums, deer, goats, all things that destroy the integrity of those forests. Climate change, wetlands, forests, but also the way we've managed our rivers. Our rivers historically had space to adjust across their floodplains. This is the Tukituki River in Hawke's Bay, upstream of those places that flooded. In 1943, it had all this space to operate. When we stop banked those rivers, the historic engineering idea was get water out to sea as fast as possible, build a big channel, build a drain, straighten the river, get that water away from people, take the land on either side to use it. When we stop banked these rivers, we didn't stop bank them out at that extent indicated by that red line. We took everything we could from them. We squeezed all of our rivers. You can go all around the country and do this. This is the Ngaruroro River, just upstream of Omahu Marae, which flooded. All that space taken away from that river. Canterbury, of course, you would know this, you've seen it, you've got great reports on the losses that you've seen in your rivers, taking away the extent of your braided rivers. There's a whole bunch of unintended consequences to this, things like rivers becoming perched up above their floodplains. This is the Tukituki River, a cross section down there at the bottom. You can see the stop banks that have been put in, and where the river used to spread across the floodplain, it can now only deposit sediment between those stop banks. And what you end up with is the riverbed rising up above the floodplain, and the communities that are outside of that stop bank being at a lower level than the river perched above the floodplain. And this is a problem in a number of places around New Zealand. We're destroying the natural aquifer recharge from our rivers, taking away the braided area that's interacting with the aquifer, and then groundwater levels are dropping. There's studies being done for the Waido, the Ngaruroro, and the Selwyn that are indicating that this is the case. We also lose habitat. Riffles, runs, pools, the rapids, the swimming holes, all that kind of stuff that fish like, that people like as well, we are losing when we straighten our rivers. And with braided rivers, we're just taking away an area of habitat, huge areas of habitat. And we've ended up with a situation where we basically have 2 big stop banks and floodwaters that fill up between them, and that water gets high and deep and has a lot of energy, so that if those stop banks are ever overtopped, that water descends into the floodplain with enormous amounts of energy. And there's a cost to this. There's a cost to the impact of when that fails. Treasury's put the cost of the Auckland and Cyclone Gabrielle floods at between 9 and 14.5 billion. And there's a human cost. There's the cost of people that lost their lives, but then there's the ongoing impact on people and their properties, stress, all sorts of things like that. Some experts wrote a paper last year called Reanimating the Strangled Rivers of Aotearoa in New Zealand. They said things like working against nature does not work. We may inadvertently be manufacturing future disasters and moving out of harm's way saved lives. It kind of echoed some things that were said in 1988 after Cyclone Bola. There was a report written by the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment at the time. They said extensive deforestation has led to greatly accelerated widespread severe erosion. Draining of wetlands has intensified flooding problems in many areas, and unwise intensive development behind stop banks has often been encouraged. Last year, Forest and Bird launched this thing, Making Room for Rivers, which I've got some copies of, which we will distribute to you for the record, and you hopefully have an online copy of as well. Basically, to get decision makers and the public to understand this idea that having stop banks tight together means deep, powerful floodwaters, and if those stop banks fail, there are enormous consequences. Having more space in floodplains or moving people out of floodplains or having more space between stop banks mean floodwaters are lower, they have less energy, there's more space for riparian areas, for rivers to self-adjust, for habitat, all sorts of things like that. And we're starting to see it be picked up a little bit in New Zealand. Councils like Greater Wellington, who have bought all these properties in that red area there so they can turn it back into green space, widen the river by 90 metres, make the stop bank bigger as well, but set it back further from the river. They've gone as far as adopting Making Room for Rivers as an idea in their flood management plan for the Ruamahanga and developed this document how they can work towards allowing more room for the region's rivers. They're even looking at policies like this policy, which used to say when considering hazard mitigation, they'd consider the need for structural protection works or hard engineering methods. They're considering striking through that and putting in green infrastructure, room for the river, or Mātauranga Māori options as the preference. Councils like Horizons are trialling the idea of having a mobility corridor for their river, actually letting it self-adjust in the space that it has. And Auckland has announced they'll be making space for water after the Auckland floods. We're starting to see it in national policy as well. Things like the NPS for freshwater management have policies on protecting the loss of river extent and protecting Indigenous habitat, Indigenous species habitat. And our national adaptation plan prioritises nature-based solutions, the idea of working with forests and wetlands and rivers to actually cope with floodwaters. And councils might think that they can't do anything yet, they're waiting for a managed retreat act or something, but you've got all these documents that manage your rivers. Things like climate change risk assessments, annual plans, long-term plans, river management plans, gravel management strategies. They're all critical places where you can adopt this as an idea, and we urge you to do so. Your 30-year infrastructure plan, for instance, which I could not find a copy of, I understand it may be under development, but should be a priority for the council. And we're seeing some good stuff coming out of Christchurch, things like the red zone being turned into wetland again, things like the Hoonhay Stormwater Basin. That Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment report said a possible effect of climate change is that cyclones of some form could pass close to New Zealand with increasing frequency. It may be that in retrospect, the Bola storm will not be regarded as such an extreme event. I think that's exactly where we're at. It said in the interest of future generations, government cannot allow the nation's floodplain land to be unwisely used. When the Rangitata the Rangitata River used to have a north and south branch. I'm sure you're aware of this. There it is in 1937, north branch on the right, south branch on the left. In 2016, that had been taken away. In 2019, when that river flooded, the river went straight back to where it had been previously. These rivers are going to take this space whether we like it or not, and we're much better off having a conversation now about where those rivers go when it floods. If you want to read more about this, we've sent you the Making Room for Rivers thing. There's a great book called Water Always Wins, and there's 2 documents referenced there, which we should have sent you already, or which we can send you if we haven't. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, for that. Pretty quick gallop through that, but I mean, relevant points all the way through there. Councillors have the opportunity now to ask questions of clarification. This is not a debate. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are you familiar with this regional council's river and catchment resilience strategy?
I'm not familiar with it in detail, but Nikki is aware of it.
Councillor Craig.
Kia ora, Tom, Nikki. Nek me kia koro mō korua kōrero I tēnei ata. Thanks so much. Really good presentation. With the widening of stop banks and stuff and moving them out, obviously a lot of that private land that's on the other side of it currently is a bit of a constraint because you need money. Have you thought about funding and where the potential options for that are?
Yeah, funding is obviously a challenge, particularly given that you rely on, or government is reluctant to step in to fund flood protection. I think even though it is a challenge, there are ways to overcome it. I would encourage council to keep lobbying central government to get involved more in prioritising this, particularly channeling money for more proactive flood management that embraces this idea of making room for rivers rather than just putting the same stuff back, which seems to be how some councils like Horizons have done that project that I put forward here. That's money from central government. But councils like Greater Wellington, for example, did the cost benefit themselves and figured that if the river overtopped the stop banks at that point where they're widening it, it would do $1 billion worth of damage. And that's a cost that they weren't willing to bear. So they fronted up with about 100 million to buy those properties, and it was worth it for them. So it's just a case of, yeah, actually trying to think really long term and looking at the cost benefit from that perspective, because it does generally work out, and then figuring out, well, how can we do it? How can central government help us? How can the councils get together to do things differently?
Thank you.
Tēnā koutou. Can I, first of all, congratulate you on your presentation. I just, one thing, the most impactful part of that presentation was actually the two maps, which was showing, you know, what used to be and what is now. And if we've received this obviously from you, Forest and Bird, but it'd be good to show those, that map, because that's very impactful as to what it was like and actually what it is now, because all of that is actually contributing to the issue that we have with it.
Yeah, so I would encourage council when you're having, because, you know, look, we're not here to tell you which rivers to retreat from or anything like that. We're really here to help you understand why it is that we're facing these problems. And I would encourage the council with communities to put that information out there of going, hey, look at where our river used to be, look at where it is now, look at what we've done. And I know ECAN's tried to take action around encroachment into rivers and things, and I commend you for that too. And I'm sorry that it hadn't worked out. But yeah, getting communities to understand this is critical, and to have things like flood maps accessible and all that kind of stuff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are you aware of the efforts that this regional council and others are putting into trying to get resilience money out of central government, somewhere around 180, 200 million a year, or 2 billion plus over 10 years, which would then allow us to do some of that significant work that's being talked about, which is a focus we have. We do have the issues of civil defence money where you are required to rebuild as is. The conversation that we would dearly love is build back better. So if there's an opportunity for you guys to come in behind that conversation about that resilience money, it gives us all an opportunity to build on those conversations, because they are conversations that we are genuinely having.
Yeah, that's a great point. We're happy to, we have talked to Greater Wellington Regional Council's Chair, Darren Ponta, who's leading that work, and are talking to him about how we can support things like the joint bids for, better approaches to flood protection.
All right, thanks. I'll pull this to a close, Tom, but I think it's a big opportunity for you to, outside of what we're doing here, because this is really formal and we can't have a wider discussion. And in our recommendation, we'll provide a reply to you, but I also think we will provide an opportunity, an invitation for you to come and talk to us about the pieces of work that are being done here, because a lot of the things that you're talking about are in train. And you know, I think that we owe it to Forest and Bird at least to let you know where we're at and start a conversation around that. So the recommendation that we have on this deputation is on the screen now. Do I have someone that would move that? Thank you, Craig. And a second, thank you, Genevieve. Is there any further discussion on that? Okay, before I move that points to the fact that we will circle back and do a reply to you through Stephanie, and then hopefully that opens up that opportunity to have a further conversation. Okay, I put the motion to the council. It's moved by Councillor Pauling, seconded by Councillor Robinson. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against? It's carried, and thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you again, actually. All right, so the second, I hear myself here, is Angela Clifford. So Angela, welcome to the table. Angela is the CEO of Eat New Zealand is here to talk about a regional food security strategy, which again is a topical issue across the region, because I think times aren't all that easy at the moment for some communities. So it's really nice that you've turned up to give us this presentation. I don't think I have to run through the rules again with you, Angela, but it is a 10-minute process, and we'll give you a ballot one, and then we'll do the questions at the end of it. So once you're set up, you can start, please.
Kia ora koutou, ko makatiri te moaka, ko Waipirita awa, no otautahi ahau, ko Angela Clifford taku ingoa, no reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. My name is Angela Clifford. I am here as a ratepayer of the Huranui district of Waitaha. We have a small farm called the Food Farm that sits between Amberley and Waipara. As mentioned, I'm also the CEO of Eat New Zealand, a national not-for-profit organisation which has spent the last 8 years connecting people to our land and ocean through our food. I also want to acknowledge my ancestors, the Cliffords. They were the first to bring sheep to the South Island in the 1840s, and so I'm here over 180 years later, again asking for consideration around how we feed our people in this region. So as such, I wanted to ask Environment Canterbury to develop a food security plan, and I'm offering my experience and understanding to help frame this. I note that in ECAN's remit, you have a vision and purpose to take action to shape a thriving and resilient Canterbury now and for our future generations. And I believe that our regional councils will be instrumental in ensuring food resilience and security for Aotearoa. It's clear to me that food security and resilience needs to be a priority. And I refer you to a recent article by Professor Alan Renwick that spoke specifically to the situation in Canterbury, but in general as well, and acknowledged that we have some really significant issues in front of us that sit around our ability to access our food in terms of climate disasters and other disasters. Personally, that's been my experience as well. I was involved in activations after both the Christchurch earthquake and the Kaikoura earthquake, and genuinely understand what food insecurity looks like in those situations for the people of Canterbury. I can also see that at a national level, there's a really significant push for a food strategy, and that's something that I'm involved in as well. I can also see that a regional food strategy would align with the Mayoral's Forum as part of their Canterbury plan for 2023 to 25. I think a food security plan needs a food systems approach, and it includes how and what we produce, how it's distributed, and how it gets on our plates, and how we keep our food out of our waste streams. And I do, as an example, I note that in your draft spatial plan, there's the only mention of food is around protection of highly productive land for food production, but I can't find any definition of what that means, or where the food is produced from that highly productive land goes to. I can't find mention of peri-urban spaces or the potential to feed the majority of Cantabrians who live in our urban areas. I believe that any food security strategy needs to be considered in partnership with communities to ensure there's access and agency or sovereignty to allow us to eat appropriate food to keep us well. And I believe that the well-being of Cantabrians also falls under your remit.
Is that you, Angela? It's nice. Pretty straightforward message, really, and straightforward challenge. Any questions for Dion?
Hey, Angela, thanks for coming in. It's a really important issue, and I've just recently done a case study on food security in terms of the supply chain networks. But what I'm curious about is, where do you see the regional council fitting in with what the TAs or the district councils and the city councils do? They specifically, a number of them are already specifically doing this. how do you think regional council can fit into that to maybe empower it or strengthen it? Or I'm unsure of that. Have you got any ideas around that?
Yeah, I sat on a Tautoko group that looked at the summary of all of the regional or district food strategies, and they really all fall short in terms of considering food production as part of a food security strategy. And I know that sounds strange, but it's the history of how food security has been seen. So really their remit sits within their district areas, and that quite often doesn't include food production areas. So I can see that that's a major fall down in any future food security strategy, is the ability to consider those food production areas. And so for me, that's why I believe regional councils will actually be the ones that have the ability to determine or have influence over what a food strategy would look like.
You know, I think that's actually probably the key part. So you're really talking about land use planning in effect here, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, absolutely. What we do with our land use, as an example, with our peri-urban zones, but also transport, absolutely everything that has anything to do with food system design, quite often falls outside of our city limits.
Other councillors, Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Angela, for coming in. Fascinating, because I've been thinking about water security and food security as well. So I'm quite interested, and I did go and look at the links here. I mean, you've talked about earlier on, sort of in a resilience perspective, a lot of your experience coming from, and I know your background there in Embley. Does it include is your thinking including quite a bit of an education, information, giving advice to people so that they can actually take care of themselves as well? Because I think that's actually something that we're really missing. If I think back to the generation that I grew up and even what I do myself now, you know, basically I think that I could be pretty secure, but it's just about how you get more people to actually look after themselves a bit as well. And I know that's probably a small part of the pie, because this is a big picture thinking that you're talking about, but it's a very, very important part.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's not so small as you might think, actually, because I was talking to someone from MPI who was involved in the response to the cyclone, and they said to me, the thing that we really need to solve is how do we get the bag of the potatoes to the person at the end of the line? So incredibly disrupted supply chains. And my answer to that is, well, you ensure the bag of potatoes is there before the disaster. So how we design our supply chains means that we have to take responsibility as communities for our own food security. So this is not asking the council to design and do a top-down solution to food security for the region. This is about working with communities to enable them to find their own version of food security, which obviously involves education and understanding, and acknowledges that we have different communities within our region that have different outcomes.
Got it, Angela. Just acknowledging too, as you mentioned to me earlier on, your daughter Ruby was on our youth ropu, so I can see now where she gets her incredible personality from and her drive to do what she does. So thank you, Angela. Yeah, my question was, I mean, I don't know what a food security plan looks like, so I'm really interested. Is there current plans in place in other regions, or is there a national sort of strategy to get a national plan in place? Or yeah, have you done work in that space?
Yes, I currently have a petition in front of the government asking for a national food strategy. And I've also sat as part of a group considering a values-based framework for New Zealand food, which was led by Aotearoa Circle and supported by KPMG. So I have a really good understanding of where food strategies sit globally and nationally. The answer is no. there isn't, and there also isn't a regional strategy that I can see that speaks to solving the problem in Aotearoa. I'm really hopeful that my region could lead the way in that space, and I think it has some really unique attributes, including a history of having to respond to disasters that could see it do that.
Kia ora, tēnā koe. Hey, thank you for your presentation, and I note the whakatauki that you've put into it as well, which is pretty much what we're about. Yeah, absolutely. But it's part of this. So have you actually done any work with Papatūpurunanga? Because part of the whole resilience of Papatūpurunanga is called this thing called a pātaka. And basically, when we looked at the Christchurch earthquakes, it was amazing on how the marae actually opened up and they were able to utilise those pātaka. So I think that there's already a kind of a program, you know, that's in place, and pātaka is actually about food storage, and you know, that was the whole basis of that food resilience program. So I'm just wondering, have you actually engaged with Ngāi Tuahuriri?
I have worked with different rūnaka, particularly around feast matariki. So working with different groups around how they tell the story of Kai over that time of year. And so I think there's a huge opportunity to learn lessons from those models that sit around marae, particularly looking how they responded after the Kaikoura earthquake and other disasters that have happened to Canterbury. And I think that's a really important lesson for us all to learn, and it can be extrapolated 100%.
Just one further comment. Yeah, so Matariki is about the harvest at the end, the seasonal harvest at the end. So that's actually a given. But the extension of that is actually about resilience in times, you know. And yeah, so I just sort of recommend that you continue that conversation at kōrero, because there is a lot of good learnings that we've had over a long time. You've been here 180 years, so we're almost, you know, in that history of that stuff. I'm sure you guys have got your own sort of idea of, you know, how you used to hang the meat, you know, and keep it for wherever. So kia ora. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll do one last question from Genevieve, and then I'll wrap this up there. Thank you, Genevieve.
Thank you so much. I've been following you for a while and what you're doing, and it's really nice to actually have you here. With regards to the supply chain issues, I went to a youth speech the other day about environmental issues, and I noticed that one particular speaker was reflecting on cost of food at the supermarket compared to what the grower receives. And one comparison was for a 1 kilogram bag of carrots was $8 to $10 at the supermarket, and the grower received 68 cents for that kilogram at their, you know, received that. So I guess my question to you is, or clarification is, with regards to the supply chain, are we looking at that particular supply from the grower to the supermarket, or the whole process? Because sometimes I feel like it's not about the food source lacking, it's about the availability for people to actually purchase something, and therefore the demand goes down because they can't afford it. So I'm just wondering if you could clarify on that. What is the main issue you see? Is it the cost and the demand, or is it the actual growers not having an incentive to grow? Thank you.
The answer is all of the above, unfortunately, and our supermarket system has created incredibly brittle supply chains, so much so that when Hawke's Bay has a cyclone, we end up with gaps on supermarket shelves in Canterbury, and that's a major issue. But I think I've been working, I guess what I'm here to do is ask the council whether they'll step into this space. If you agree that you will, then I can help you unpack what I think some of the solutions are. But I believe they look like something that I'm calling mana-centred local food systems. So they're food systems that more closely connect our food producers with our eaters and all of the benefits that come from that. One of those benefits is more affordable food, and that's been shown with recent research that shows our farmers markets and our vegetable box providers are now providing food that is cheaper than our supermarkets. So it's those extended supply chains that are impacting on the cost of food for our people. So reimagining those supply chains, acknowledging there will always be supermarkets and it will always be important to export our food as part of our economy, reimagining those marginal pieces to see how they can feed us in terms of food security is the opportunity as I see it.
Thank you, Angela. Unfortunately, we're out of time to be able to do much more than this, but just remind councillors that the CWMS has Mahinga Kai as one of the main things in it, and that's a part of what we do in terms of how we need to pay attention to that. And the other thing, of course, is that water use and food supply, water security and food security are pretty well linked in Canterbury. I'm going to do the same thing that we did with the previous speaker, and our recommendation is a pretty straightforward recommendation. But in terms of getting back to you, Angela, I'm going to take you up on your challenge and put our hand up as a regional council to get involved with you. So you want to move that, Genevieve. Have a second. Thank you, Grant. So it's been moved by Councillor Robinson and seconded by Councillor Edge. Is there any further conversation? No further conversation. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against. And that's carried. Thank you, Angela. Well done. So we're going now to 4.3. Is it? 4.2. No deputations, no petitions. 5, extraordinary urgent business. There isn't any. There are no notices of motion at number 6. So we move to 7.1, which is the unconfirmed minutes of the council meeting. And we're really just looking at those for matters of clarity. Is any councillor got an issue with those minutes as for clarity? Put the motion on the.
We noted it, but there is that one spelling mistake on page 8. Chair, not should be chair. So yeah, sure that'll leave it there. Thanks, Chair.
No discussion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. All those against. Carried. We lost all our councillors. Said that we lost all our councillors. Oh, she did, yes. Should we bring it back and bring it back and do it again? That's a bit unusual. There's other things to do. All right, so 8 point, the resolution status report, Catherine. She in the room. Oh, she is. Got a leaky council room today.
We're just going to farewell the public forum speakers. Tēnā koutou. This report brings the visibility of the status of resolutions that have come before you previously to identify those that have been complete and those that are still in progress. I'm happy to take any questions. That's the third of those that have gone.
Thank you, Chairman. Catherine, just in terms of responding to public forum submitters, as a science, ECAN is a science-led organisation. When submitters clearly represent the best science in making their submissions, and we are responding to them. Do we note those? How do we respond in terms of noting the discrepancy between their view of life and the scientific led information that we as an organisation are working with?
I'll give a general procedural thing, and then it may be that one of the directors might wants to respond. Somebody from the relevant section within council is in the room to listen to the presentation as it's been made, and on the basis of what is being said and what we understand, then a response was drafted that has gone back through the relevant directorate. So if it's science-led, it will have gone through Tim and his team, and will have, depending on what the council has decided they'd like to do with that, will be in that response.
So the council makes the decision, will make the decision on what content of the is in the response, is what you say.
It goes through a process from the director through the chief executive, and then the chair will sign them off. So they all actually go back out under the chair's signature. So the chair has, because the presentation is to council, then it goes back through that process. So it has gone through quite a rigorous process around checking the content of the response prior to actually being put back out.
Yeah, it's not quite the, so the question I'm interested in is the content of the submitters' views. And if you use Doug Rankin's opinion on the state of nitrates, which is contrary to the position that the science that the regional council is telling us is what's going on, as well as the levels of toxicity and various other things. Do we respond to the submitters and point out that we don't agree with them on the basis of the science and which of their opinion in the first place?
I'll have to defer this one to either the Director of Science or the Chief Executive, because my team manage the process of it, but the actual content of it is managed by their experts.
Catherine, can I just absolutely get my head clear about what you're saying, Councillor Mackenzie? You're saying that when we respond to a deputation, right, from the organisation's point of view, taking into account what was said at that deputation, that if you don't, are you saying if you don't agree with that, what recourse do you have?
It's not. I'm less concerned about people's opinions. What I am concerned about, though, is when science is quoted at us, and as a science-led organisation, we say this isn't the way we understand what is telling us the science. Do we respond to that submitter and say, clearly, you have legitimate opinions, but as a science-led organisation, we actually don't agree with those opinions?
Through you, Chair, thank you very much. And thank you, Councillor Mackenzie, for the question. It is one of those where you are seeking that assurance. What we do is we look to all of the facts and evidence that we have within the organisation, and we utilise that as a response. If it aligns with what was put in the deputation, then it aligns. If it does not align, it is contrary. However, it is peer reviewed and it meets the requirements of science within the national debate around science. In terms of staff putting forward a response, we would utilize any prior decision the council has made, any prior resolutions and submissions, and the facts and evidence of our science, and we would do it in that manner. A director would manage that depending on the question and the topic. It will be coming to me so that I can provide that assurance and confidence that it meets those requirements, Councillor Mackenzie, and then I would pass it to the chair, who has final right and say about whether those go out. I hope that attends to the process.
And I thank you. That gives me huge reassurance.
Kia ora, thanks. I just have a question. Have we ever provided science which has been proven incorrect after some time?
I can answer in a high level, but Tim could probably be specific, and if I need to, I can come back in. Tim, Director of Science.
I think it would be naive to say that we have never produced science that has been subsequently shown to be different, but that's the nature of science. That's not the nature of Environment Canterbury, that's the nature of science.
Thanks, Catherine. Just seeking clarification on page 54, item 4 at the bottom, and really referencing the paper later on in our agenda. My understanding is that you will insert a note into that item 4, explaining the delay in the processing of that item. Is that correct?
Yes, paper 8.4 in this meeting has got a fuller explanation of why the delay has been in implementing this resolution. And we felt that due to the nature of that, it required a more substantive response than merely a single sentence in this point in the papers. And depending on what you decide to resolve in 8.4, then future status reports will reference the fact that that has been before the council.
Okay, no further clarification required, so that the resolution is status report is on the screen. Could I have someone that can move that, please? Thank you, Greg. Seconded by Claire. Sorry, Councillor Burns and Councillor Mackay. Any further discussion on that? If there's no further discussion on that, all those in favour, please say aye. All those against, that's carried. Thank you very much. I think Catherine, for 8.2, which is where I withdraw from this as a conflict. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. I'll move to 8.2, which is our PC7 paper. And I'm going to call to the table. Who's coming to present that? Is Andrew here?
It's Andrew Perrin.
Andrew, kara mai. And that's on page 56 of our agendas, everybody. Kia ora, over to you, Andrew. Introduce it. Thank you.
Kia ora, councillors. I'm really pleased to bring you this paper today. Plan Change 7 was the first kind of tentative start happened in 2016, where we started working with both the Waimakariri and the OTOP zone committees. This piece of plan change work has changed much of the land and water plan. It's changed the region-wide provisions, helped align the land and water plan with the national direction that we've received over time. It's taken the views and wishes of the zone committee, and it's adapted those into sub-regional changes for both the OTOP zone and the Waimakariri zone. We've paused this work prior to notification to ensure that mana whenua views were better taken into account as part of Plan Change 7. We've held a hearing where more than 600 submitters came and gave their views to an independent hearings panel who considered all of those submissions. We've received 5 appeals on Plan Change 7. 4 of those have been resolved. That means that the council is in a really good position to make Plan Change 7 partially operative, with one appeal remaining that's still before the High Court. Today, your job is to either decide to make Plan Change 7 partially operative or to not make Plan Change 7 partially operative. I think I can step away from the table now unless there are any questions.
Take questions first. Are there any questions that councillors have? Councillor Kramer.
Through the chair, kia ora, Andrew. You mentioned that Te Runanga, Ngaito and Arawhenua Runanga were initially against, and then that was sorted out. Can you just quickly remind me again of some of the issues and how that was done?
Sure. As I understand the concerns of Te Runanga o Ngāi Tahu and Arawhenua, they related to our understanding of Te Manaro Te Wai and where Mahinga Kai fitted within the hierarchy of obligations that Te Manaro Te Wai introduces. We resolved that appeal, at least in part, by the work that this council has done to form an authentic partnership with mana whenua for our next round of planning for the development of the regional policy statement. We know through the work that we've done over time that we need to take a de novo and as new look at flow and allocation regimes right across the region. I think that aligns us much more strongly with the position that Arawhenua and Te Runanga o Ngāi Tahu are seeking through this next round of planning.
Kia ora, councillors. Any other questions? I just had one, Andrew. Can you just, so I know in 2019 it was lodged, can you just take us back a little bit further, just the time frame before that of the creation of the plan, and just remind us how long that's been?
Absolutely. Plan Change 7 comes in 3 parts. All 3 parts started at around about the same time in 2016. What we are continually exposed to at Environment Canterbury is an evolving platform of national direction. That formed the basis of the omnibus plan change. But it wasn't just that. There were a number of views that had come out that suggested that, for example, if we were better identifying where salmon spawning was occurring or where the community was swimming in our waterways, then we could put in better controls right across the region. That formed the basis of Part A of Plan Change 7. We utilised a range of industry groups along with Te Paihuranga to gain runanga views into Part A. Parts B and C were driven by the OTOP and Waimakariri zone committees, where those 2 zone committees looked at their zone and the environmental freshwater issues that were occurring within the zone. That's resulted in stronger protection of the waterways within both of those zones and a reduction of the nutrient loss limits that are attached to farming consents. Those decisions are difficult decisions for communities to make themselves, and I commend both the OTOP and the Waimakariri communities for coming together and putting a position on the table. That's really helpful for the work that this council is doing going forward in terms of the review of the regional policy statement and the eventual review of the land and water plan and coastal plan.
Andrew, thanks so much for that important history, I think, to get laid down here. So, kia ora, thank you. So, yeah, you can step back on the table. I think John's would like to move it. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Swiggs, I think I saw your hand move there. So, John, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I take this opportunity to firstly thank Andrew and the staff for what has been an incredible process in working through all the permeations, all the challenges, all the views, all the values in quite diverse catchments across South Canterbury, the Waimakariri, and those challenges that we've put into the omnibus. And I guess to the question about the fallibility of science, we have the fallibility of planning as well. And the omnibus gives us the opportunity to fix up some things that we didn't get right, I guess, the first time. Some of the challenges around veggie growing, Ngaitahu values, habitat protection for native biodiversity and the salmon and sports fish and a bunch of other things, and bring us into alignment with the NPS. This has been a challenging process, and the requirements that we will place upon, I guess, our constituents in the OTOP region, particularly within the agricultural space, around the flows in rivers, the need to reduce water, the implications that they will feel from an economic challenge, the social challenge, the real pressures and stresses that we will put upon them as we move forward are going to be significant, which has brought a lot of attention to the debate along the way. And equally, when we move into the Waimakariri and look at both water allocation, but more specifically nutrient reduction, particularly in the area of Cust and some of those places where we have recognised the influence of those groundwater transfers coming under the Waimakariri River and beginning to influence the drinking water of Christchurch. So again, the timelines and the reductions and the need for reductions of nutrients, and in particular nitrate in those areas, are going to create real long-term challenges for those folk that farm there today. What their opportunities are today, 10 years, 20 years, 40 years, 50 years, are going to be significantly different to others. So this has been a very, very challenging conversation. And I know some of our fellow councillors have pushed back because they do have a conflict. They live in those areas and they in fact face the challenges or potentially face the challenges that were being imposed upon them. So I thank again Andrew, the staff, the team, the organisation for what we have achieved to date in what has been a very, very challenging environment. I thought the Selwyn was challenging when we went through the Selwyn, and it was. But when I look at the implications of what we're implying, putting upon our people in the South Canterbury area, within the Waimakariri, it is going to be a hard life. I guess if I take one slight consolation from it, I guess the NPS FM and Te Mana o Te Wai will, again, I guess, put increasing pressures on. So at least we have started that process and moving along to where we potentially need to be with those attributes. So just once again, to Andrew, the team and this organisation for what we have achieved and bringing this to, I guess, a conclusion. Thank you very much.
Kia ora, Councillor Sanku. Councillor Swiggs, do you want to speak now or at the end? Kappa.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have too much more to add from what Councillor Sunkel said, but I just wanted to cast my mind back to the first OTOP meeting that I had because I represent the ECAN down at Timaru at OTOP, and there was this very tense conversation about PC7 between the Runanga representatives and some of the farmers. Everybody was focused on the same direction, but the way that we were looking at getting there was quite different. At the end of this conversation, however, everybody kind of agreed because they thought what has happened through this planning process is going to ultimately, and I quote the words here in the background, improve the quality and the quantity of fresh water in these zones. And everybody was agreeing that that was hugely important for the long-term sustainability of our region and the license to do what people want to do. But I just wanted to say in that respect to thank the OTOP people, all the members now and in the past, because there's some new members and some old members there. It sounds like it's been quite an interesting process and a challenging process, but also one that's opened a lot of people's eyes. And moving forward, we've got a new regime that'll come in as well, which will change things again. And the amount of change that is being put on some of the people in the communities down there is incredible. And we do need to acknowledge that change has consequences for people. And that change has consequences in terms of people's mental health, their ability to do what they used to do, which is not a bad thing, but it's something that we need to understand and acknowledge. So I just wanted to, again, say thank you to those people and just mindful of the, the impacts that this will have on people.
Got it, Councillor Swiggs. Is there any other councillors wishing to speak to this motion? Councillor Edge.
Thanks, Chair. I want to congratulate staff for bringing forward this plan change to provide a little bit more certainty a lot quicker. There's only one outstanding issue that needs to be resolved, and I think that this means bringing this forward will help with efficiencies in our consenting and planning process. And I particularly note and confirm the comments made by Councillor Sunkel as well. One thing I just wanted to note was in terms of Plan Change 2 part of this process for the Waimakariri River, it basically is a consequential change to the Waimakariri River Regional Plan that area of the primary area in Waimakariri is now amalgamated with the rest of the Waimakariri part of the plan, and that way the management of the land and freshwater resources can all go together, and the local people can understand that a lot more. And I note too that council staff are going to prepare a a strategy to support the communication and implementation of these plan changes, and convey that to communities so that it's easily understood. So that's really good. So I certainly support the these resolutions.
Go on, Councillor Rich. Any other councillors like to speak to the motion? Ka pai. Just before we put it to the vote, and I didn't put the motions either, but you can all see them on the screen there. They're pretty wordy, so hence I didn't read them all out. As you can imagine, it's quite a big piece of paperwork, this plan, and you can hear the impact it can have on the things that we work on. So lots of stuff there. But I just wanted to firstly just reflect on, and that's why I asked Andrew the question about when this started. So 7 years to get here, 2 terms of this council effectively. And so, you know, it's just important to reflect on all the work that goes into these things, not only by our staff and councillors around the table here, but also like Dion and John have mentioned, and Grant, the communities that are out there helping us get to these points, and including the appeals process that we've been through, that all in all try to help this be the best it can be. Just really want to acknowledge all that work that's gone on. And I think people can see that we do have more of these processes in front of us, and they are really significant and historical things to get done, because as you can see, councillors can come and go, but plans remain. There you go. The rules remain. So they do continue past us, and that's the opportunity we have as a council to either approve this or not, but also going forward in our work we've got to do, because those things really do set the frameworks for how we're going to look after our environment, our waterways, and our land, as people have said, and our coastlines and others as we go forward. So just a big acknowledgement to that. So I'm happy to put this through the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? Any abstentions? No, carried. So now that it's carried, I will officially thank our staff and congratulate our staff. Like John has already alluded to, thank you so much, Andrew, and your team for all the work that they've done in getting us here. Like I've just said, a long process, and you've been here the whole time, as I'm sure many of your team have. But also to acknowledge all those, like I said, in the community that have helped us as well. So yeah, ka nui te mihi, nui ki a koutou katoa o tō koutou mahi tēnei mahere tēnā koutou. So thank you so much. Kia ora. Well done. And Peter, you can come back.
Yes, I just reiterate Craig's words, and thank you for sharing that, Craig. I think you did really well, and the comments that have come through. Being involved in this process at the OTOP level in South Canterbury in the early days, it was fraught. It does take a long time if you're at one end of the continuum and someone else is at the other end of the continuum to find out where that middle is. But that's what those processes were, and I think that this council, in terms of the work that we need to do going forward, not specifically around thing, but you know, we just need to pay attention to that. Everyone's getting a fair say, and we find out where the middle is, and it may be way the other side of where you think it should be, but that's what the processes are for. So thank you for that. 8.3, we're going to that now. Electoral systems for 2025 local government elections. And Catherine, could you come to the table, please, with that? And I think it's a pretty straightforward process that we've got in front of us. But if you just run us through that, Catherine, and then we'll get you to step back.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is for you to consider the electoral system for the next triennial local government elections. This council currently uses first past the post as its electoral system, and if there was no decision made or no report brought, then that would be the system that remains. We have, however, decided to bring this to you for you to overtly decide whether you want to remain with first past the post or change to single transferable voting. No matter which way the vote goes today, we are required to put a public notice in by the 12th of September advising our electorate, our constituencies of what that decision has been of the voting system and their right to have a poll if they so choose. I'm happy to take any questions that there might be in relation to the paper.
Catherine, I think you stepped back. I think that's pretty clear to councillors where we're at with this process. Put those resolutions up there and we'll get a mover in a second, and then there's an opportunity to speak to these 2 points. So moved by Councillor Sunkel and seconded by Councillor Karakia. You didn't. I thought you nodded. Sorry, a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Edge. Right, discussion. Comment? None? Great. Yep.
Oh, kia ora koutou. Yeah, I'm going to vote against the motion because I am quite keen to see STV put in place. I think it can offer a more representative system in time, especially if you look at having a larger pool of councillors elected from particular wards. So I'm interested in that. I understand that might not be where we go, but I'm just definitely keen for that. And I do acknowledge that there is other factors to helping get better representation at councils across the country, which includes civic education, encouraging more people and more diverse people to stand. Lowering the voting age is another one, 4-year terms, etc., that have been outlined in the Future for Local Government report. But yeah, I'm interested in looking at something new. Kia ora. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we're in discussion, I just make the simple point that STV does work in those constituencies where you have a large number of candidates in a space taking up the potential to be elected. The advice that we have had to date is that our smaller constituencies, lack of candidates provides no great advantage with STV, and the fact that first past the post provides an actual advantage in that space, just as part of the discussion. And again, if we look at those councils that have chosen to go the STV line, it is less than 20% of our regional and territorial authorities. So for me, I'm quite happy to stay in the space just as part of the conversation of first past the post. I don't see any of our other territorial authorities at this point looking to shift within Canterbury, and Christchurch City have confirmed that they will remain with first past the post at this point in time. So I wouldn't like to see us out of step and believe first past the post is the optimal way to go.
Thank you. Vicky, Councillor Southworth, and then Councillor Mackenzie.
Kia ora, thank you. I'm really torn with this one. I've stated it several times now. I have real concern about the lack of diversity around a table, and I'll be really specific in saying women are substantially underrepresented. We have 3 women at a table of 16. Across the region of South, or the whole of South Island, the regional council specifically, there are 47 councillors, of which 7 are women. So we have a real issue with that. My concern with STV is I'm not sure that going to STV would address that issue, and I can see that it could actually make it more difficult for candidates to stand, but given that New Zealand for local government doesn't work generally with parties, you know, it's sort of like the party stuff is behind the scenes, and as an individual, the idea of standing without party support in a constituency that was made up of, say, 2 of our current constituencies seems to me to actually be really quite a daunting, that would be quite a daunting thing to stand in that scale, and would also we'd end up with an awful lot of candidates. But I'm really torn because I also feel like the first past the post really hasn't delivered the sort of democracy and representation at the table that we should be seeing in 2023. I feel like, and this is slightly on tangent, but you know, I really feel like more participatory democracy, ensuring that we hear from a really diverse range of voices and a representative range of voices is perhaps would be more effective. And of course, there is a cost associated with STV. So if it were possible instead to put costs to delivering on a good sort of, citizen assembly type of process for some of our key issues, then I think that would perhaps deliver on more, but that's not the option on the table. So I'm going to listen to the debate and then make my decision, because I'm really unsure or quite where I sit with this. And I don't think there are answers specifically because it's not been done in lots of other parts of New Zealand. And I almost feel like it's a real shame CCC, to my mind, didn't go with STV, because at that scale, I can see there's lots of value in having multiple partners within the same constituency, but the size of our constituencies would just be so enormous if we were trying to get the sort of numbers of councillors that where STV is sort of indicated as making a difference in terms of diverse representation. So yeah, I'll pause and listen. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I read the recommendations for the local government view on democratic processes and was never convinced by the conclusions that what they were proposing was any more democratic than the systems we've got. So then, and one of the things they're looking for is greater diversity. And in my time on this council, we have had significant diversity. I think in the last, we were nearly 50% split on gender. We had significant racial mix, and we had significant opinion mix. And even around this council, even though Vicky might lament the fact that we have less women than men, there is still significant diversity of opinion, which is what diversity is about. Just because you might come from a different ethnic or financial background or gender background doesn't mean that you bring diversity to the discussion. Real diversity is based on difference of opinion. We have significant differences of opinion around this council table. Should the process of debate allow that diversity of opinion to be expressed properly. So my view is that I don't see a burning platform that requires change. And the recommendation from the electoral system was that in the circumstances, the constituents we have and the pool of candidates, there would unlikely to be any benefit of shifting the democratic process by which we elect our candidates. And so I'm not persuaded that anything needs changing. Thank you.
Councillor Mackay.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair. I will be supporting the resolution that we've actually got today to maintain the status quo, first past the post. I think we only need to cast our minds back to the previous term of council where there was, as somebody noted already, 50% females sitting on it. We had a wide range of age, and it was sad when perhaps some of our three of our younger councillors actually saw other options outside the council table. And as Councillor Mackenzie's just said, a very wide range of opinion, both at the previous term's council and at this term's council. From a representation point of view, I think that STV, particularly under the current way we've got our wards set out, we would require a whole relook at that, and it does worry me around the size of our region. Either when you look at perhaps the city being carved out as one ward and perhaps the province has been carved out as another, how you would actually get a fair and equal representation. And I think that's a little bit of what Councillor Southworth has sort of touched on. How do you get that to be fair and even workable? From an STP point of view, and I've done a few voting elections in my time, every time I get an STV, you really don't, well, I personally don't spend a lot of time, and I don't think I really give it due consideration in making value judgments around the STV process. So I am concerned that people will see it confusing and perhaps just put it in the too hard basket and not partake in it. So in one way, I think that's a loss of democracy.
Okay, Greg, and then Grant.
Kia ora, thank you. I too, like Councillor Southworth, sort of torn, but there are also other mitigating factors at the moment, I think, about going anywhere other than the norm, and which I'll give an example with the upcoming central government election, where one of the parties at least has said that the shape of council here now would change, i.e. the two Environment Canterbury Ngāi Tahu councillors would go. Personally, I don't think that's a very good move at all, but that aside, I think sticking with the current status is where I'll be ending up.
Thanks, Chair. No, I think that the comments from the previous speakers in support of this have covered a lot of the bases in terms of the pros and cons, and I'll be supporting the resolution.
Right, so no more votes in support. We've had enough speakers in support. Are you voting against? Are you? Yep, go.
Yeah, I'll be voting against the resolution. I'm not totally convinced that this is the right order to be doing things in. I think the system is actually a little bit broken in the way that our order is presented. I think we should be looking at our constituencies first and then breaking it down to how we vote for those constituencies. But in saying that, I personally believe that STV is a better voting system, and I'll and you know that's what I would be voting for today. I just note, if you keep a keen eye on what's going on in Parliament at the moment, there's a fair few little bits and pieces going through urgency. So yesterday the bill for voting for 16-year-olds for local government was introduced, which is probably going to go through Parliament under urgency before they before Parliament ends. And there's also a bill in there to sort out the system so that Māori wards are introduced first in terms of what we're making decisions on, and then the constituencies, and then how we vote. So it might actually sort of resolve itself, but I'm not going to vote for the resolution because I think the system's broken. So I'll vote against it.
Okay, so no more debate on this. I don't think we don't need any more. I think the resolution is on the screen, moved by Councillor Sunkel and seconded by Councillor Eaps. Councillor Sunkel, do you want to have final say on this?
No, I think the views have been canvassed, and maybe we require a division, given there is some debate as to where we're going.
So Councillor Sunkel's called for a division, and when we have a division, the government staff do the division. Yes, Peter, thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Pauline. Councillor Scott. Councillor Sunkel. Councillor Robinson. Councillor Swiggs. Councillor Mackay. Councillor Cranwell. Councillor Southworth.
Against.
Councillor Deche. Councillor Edge. Councillor Burns. Councillor Karakia. Councillor Davies. Councillor McKenzie. Councillor Ward. Councillor East. I have that 11-5.
Thank you for that. Any further discussion? Thank you for that. Thank you for the discussion. It's been worthwhile hearing what councillors think. It's been passed 11-5. So thank you. Right. Shall we make? Shall we make? Can we stop the nonsense, please? And can we move on to 8.5? Oh, I say for us, just trying to get out of here, but earlier. So 8.4 is Derek. Thank you. Yeah, Giles also. Do you want to come up, Giles? So Derek's the manager of public operations, transport operations, and Giles is the director for public transport. So over to you, Derek.
You all right? Yeah, so I'm here seeking an update to a previous resolution made by council. That resolution was to remove the 125 service from Christchurch Airport Terminus at the time that our new port-to-port service goes live, with the intention of putting it on Orchard Road. So in about 3 weeks' time, our port-to-port service goes live, and that will increase the use of the bays we currently have in the airport terminus. I think at the time the resolution was made, we felt we had to remove the 125 service to make sure we were not over capacity in that terminus. Reality is the world has changed since. Tourism has not recovered to the extent that we expected. So there's less pressure in that facility, and working with the airport, we've come up with an alternative arrangement that allows us to keep 125 in for the time being. So in essence, I'm asking for an update to the resolution that states that the 125 will remain in the airport terminus until such a time as we need to remove it because of the pressure in that facility.
Thank you, Derek. Any questions of Derek around this? Yeah.
Just two questions of clarification. Do we have the numbers of inbound passengers on the 125 that get off in the terminal? That we're sending it back to, if it hadn't actually come out anyway. And the distance from the Orchard Road across the car park to there, what's that in meters? Because it doesn't appear to be that far.
I don't have passenger numbers off the top of my head. It is one of our lowest patronised services. Distance-wise, you're talking about 400 metres from Orchard Road to the airport terminal. From the terminus to the terminal is about 85 metres.
And I apologize if I've missed a briefing on this, but I'm wondering why we as a council have been asked to have a reflection on this. Isn't this a management issue?
So in April 22, council passed a resolution to move the 125 service. We currently have not yet moved it, and we will not be moving. We're not going to move it because the tourism numbers do not require us to move it, but we will move it when the requirement comes to pass as tourism numbers increase.
Follow up, if I may, Mr. Chairman. Why in April 22 were we asked to have an opinion on this, and why was it not a management decision?
I would concur, Councillor. In future, we should not be bringing resolutions of such a detailed operational matter to council.
So for clarity, this is to give clarity.
This is to retain the existing resolution, but to just acknowledge that the numbers of passengers coming through the airport from a tourism perspective do not require us to remove the service, which was originally anticipated. Chief Executive and myself met with the airport this week, and they indicated that tourism numbers are increasing and are about 80% from memory of where they previously were, and they expect that to continue to increase. So we do anticipate that the pressure on the bays at the airport will materialise, and that therefore we will implement the council resolution from April 22.
Or you guys can step back, I guess, if we've got a mover. We've got a second after that. Seconded by Councillor Sunkel. Any discussion now on that?
Can I just say thank you to the staff? I mean, this was something when I first got elected that the community down in Hallsville and Hornby all sort of came to me and said, what's happening here? What's going on? What's going on? And it's actually been quite incredible how many people have come to me that actually use that bus. And a lot of elderly people from those communities actually get the bus, go to the terminal, and watch planes. Like, it's pretty cool. I thought that was actually really cool. It's just an enabling service, and it's not a huge change. But yeah, just when I brought it to the staff and some of the, you know, the nuances around the recommendation that were done in 22 didn't quite sort of, you know, wanted to unpack it a little bit. And they've done a bit of work, and I just wanted to say thank you to the staff for actually, you know, following through and having those conversations so that we got to the point today. And thank you very much, Karakia.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's good. It's good that we're going in this process, just meeting an immediate, resolving an immediate issue, but keeping the original proposal on the books, if you like. It's an important for our community. It was part of the consultation process to make it very clear to people what the new route was going to involve, and people need to know that. And I see from comms there'll be obviously some communication going, so it's very clear to people. So I support this resolution.
It's great. Thank you very much. So clarity for clarity's sake. We don't need any further discussion on this because I think we're going in a rat hole somewhere here. And is this a jibe, Councillor Karakia? Something serious that you want to offer?
Just want to talk all the previous speakers, especially Councillor Swiggs. But also they get 450 steps as well to the bus stop and back again. I'll talk about the plane spotters.
I knew that wouldn't be a light comment from you, Councillor Karakia. Look, can I just put this? I am hurrying up. So the motion is on the screen. It's moved by Councillor East, seconded by Councillor Sunk. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against, that's carried. We'll move to 8.5. Submission on the proposed Orari Mātaitai Reserve. Is Stephanie's going to speak to this?
Thank you, Chair, through you. This paper is in front of you to highlight the submission that was made. The norm would be that you would have all been deeply involved in said submission. However, due to the timelines, as you're aware, we did notify you that was tight. It was partly tight because you were on leave at the time. And in that context, what we have done is progress through the alternative process, which is to be able to put a submission forward and have the chair review it and decide whether or not he goes forward. The chair did so. And indeed, what this does is it recognizes the proposed Orari Mātaitai Reserve in South Canterbury in recognition of our two-year relationship, in particular with Te Runanga o Arawhenua, and in that context, supporting this submission to MPI. Councillors, basically, you are asked through the resolution to receive and note the Canterbury Regional Council submission on an application by Te Runanga o Arawhenua to establish a Mātaitai Reserve on the Orari River. Back to you, Chair, if there are questions.
Yeah, so any questions of Stephanie on this issue? Councillor McKenzie.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for clarity, because it says so in the papers, but I just want to make sure that the Mātaitai only applies to the water body itself. It doesn't apply to adjoining land.
That is my understanding. I will double check. I'm looking at, yes, I've got head nods. Councillor McKenzie, I can confirm that.
And so as a follow-up, if I may, Mr. Chair, so the limitations for the adjacent landowners is only around fishing in those commercial fishing, I think, isn't it? Thank you.
Sorry, councillors, I'm conscious that Councillor Southworth is online, so I just want to make sure that she has the answer as well. That is related to commercial fishing.
Thanks, Chair. Just a query for clarification. Page 76, item 4. Just clarification about the second sentence. It refers to the application area including all South Island fisheries waters. I understand that might not be correct.
Thank you, Councillor Edge. Chair, if I might, can I pass to the Director of Strategy Planning, Catherine Trott?
Councillor Edge, that is wording taken from the MPI notification of the Mātaitai, and it applies to all fisheries waters and subject to the A to I bullets that are set out below.
Any other clarity from Stephanie, you think, Genevieve?
Firstly, I think it's a fantastic application for that. With regards to the river mouth itself and out to sea, does it apply to a small amount of nautical miles from the river mouth? Like, where does it close, that Mātaitai, please?
Look, I can't answer that. I've got any knowledge in that area, but maybe there's somebody. My presumption would it be to the river mouth, to high water, you know, we're out. Yeah. Yeah, high water line, spring high water tide mark, or whatever it is.
Catherine, did you?
Catherine?
I was just going to say the map indicates that it comes to that line.
This question might be a wee bit naive, but having lived in this area all my life, does this give them exclusive rights to all those water bodies, or shared?
It includes commercial fishing, but you can send your boys down there to catch a tuna if they're brave enough. Or your girls, actually. I mean,
Anyone.
or anyone, actually.
Yes. Shared.
Yeah. Look.
Just to be clear, this is, even though it has a Māori name, it's actually quite holistic. I mean, just the example of you know, the Mātaitai actually on Whakamutunga. I mean, tangatiaki who actually are responsible for patrolling it, policing it. But it's not just Māori; it's actually treaty partner as well, non-Māori. So it's actually it's a really great idea, and we've proven it time and time again. And it was why Rapaki actually was the first one to ever have it, is because it actually is all about the fishery itself. It's about actually trying to get the original kind of mahinga kai numbers, populations up. So it's controlled. Yeah.
And just briefly, just to reinforce that, I had the privilege of sitting with Henry Couch on Monday for an hour talking about whakaropo, very interesting, the history and the benefits that have come from it, from things like reseeding with pipi and cockle and seaweed and all manner of things. So absolutely support this. Is fantastic.
Right, thank you. Look, I'll put that motion to thank you, moved by Councillor Ward, seconded by Councillor Bramwell. Sorry, I missed everyone on the way around. So Stephanie, we can take you out of the conversation now. Any further discussion from councillors on this? I think the point that's made by Councillor Karakia, this is a positive thing for communities. You know, yep.
Kia ora tātou. Yeah, just to acknowledge that it's awesome that he can support this, and as Councillor Karakia has already said, it's about the mana of Katihuirapa on that river, one of the ancestral rivers. It's once again, it is just the river. It doesn't include any of the whenua around it, and it just helps them to look after that native fishery, and then create, and if they need to, working with the community, create bylaws in and around the native fishery. So it doesn't include trout or salmon or anything. It's only the native fishery. It's only on the waters. So it's not anything to do with land or anything. And as it said, the only one that doesn't include at the moment is whitebait. And then that's something that they'll probably start working on next. But that's another issue completely, and that's working with DOC outside MPI. So fully support it. I'm glad we and the submission we put in supporting this, and yeah, really encourage that, you know, if there's any more from Mātaitai that it goes through. But yeah, as Councillor Karakia said, it's a holistic thing around over the rivers, not the land. But and the reason why the map goes wide, and unfortunately the farmers in Kaikoura didn't realise and went to court and everything regarding it. It's just an indicative of the catchment, and it doesn't include the whenua. So kia ora tātou.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Esther, maybe do you want to say anything, Nick? Are you happy?
I just support everything that that Yane has said, and Nook as well, and having lived in this area all my life, I think it's great for the future of that area.
Thank you very much. So put that motion that's moved by Councillor Ward, seconded by Councillor Cranwell. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, and that's carried. So we'll move now to the Chair's report 8.6. Don't intend to dwell on this too much. There are 3 items in there. The Future for Local Government report, which we're having a look at as a council through a briefing process, and we will form some opinion on that, which I'm looking forward to. The resource management reform bills, they're somewhere in the house. You know, they're somewhere in the house. That's all we can say about them. What's our Future Canterbury campaign? From my point of view, it's going really well. I'm not too sure how councillors see what's our Future Canterbury campaign, but I know that the feedback we're getting is reasonably positive in terms of engagement. And we're looking forward to doing more work with the communities, and we're doing more work with the Operative Runanga and for their engagement, and that process is going pretty well also. So any comment from any councillors? Thank you, Councillor Swicks.
It's more of a question, and it's around the Our Future Canterbury. The numbers of the submissions or the engagements that we've had so far. Do we have any, like, they're just numbers? You know, to me, I don't really get a feel for if that's a good number or a bad number or whatnot. Are we able to get kind of like, is there any KPIs or anything like that to measure it against, or to understand if it's tracking well, if it's tracking behind or tracking ahead or something like that? Would just be good.
Well, I think, yeah, sorry to cut you off, but I think that the question's to me. I'm not asking any staff to respond to this, but that's a point that you brought up, and I think it's a point we can carry out of this meeting to chase down. Yeah. Others? Grant?
Thank you. I think it's really good that we're potentially going to look a little bit more closer at those Future for Local Government recommendations. There's some good recommendations in that. I'm particularly looking at recommendation 13 and 15, which talks about sort of working more closely with government, perhaps more intergenerational thinking about funding for climate change issues. So I think developing that and thinking about how we might go and how the rest of the region might respond to that is a good idea.
I think these things are really hard. If you read those 17 recommendations, and in my position of trying to respond to them individually, it's reasonably difficult. The theory of it is, how do you actually get more ingrained legislation that puts their roles more in focus? How do you get funding for those roles? How do you get funding in terms of the communities that we represent? How do you retain localism but get efficiency in local government, which is the issue that we have? And everyone goes to the corners, don't they? They go, well, shit, you're not going to move my boundary. That's the first reaction. What does this mean? Does it mean you're going to take my job off me? But I think if we have insight the fact that the communities of interest, we've got catchment groups and those sort of, they're communities of interest that we're concentrating on, and we can't lose sight of that where we head. I think we need to be provocative from this council's point of view. I think this council is a safe council to say, well, what would happen if we had EPA do all the, we let EPA here and they did all the enforcement and compliance stuff. What does that make us look like? Do we just need to have a whole regulator, a single regulator for Canterbury or for the South Island? What does that look like? I mean, we need to pose those questions to ourselves initially, and then if we get some sort of that push out, because we have a regional connection, I think it's an easier discussion for us to have as a regional council than it is probably TAs. TAs are I shouldn't say this, but I feel, but I'm going to, because I think TAs are in more of an emotional space in terms of their communities. We can have a more of a strategic look at things, and that's not. I don't want to be disrespectful to mayors, but mayors are different. I keep saying that, Vicky, and then you guys.
Yeah, I just thought I'd comment on our future Canterbury conversation. So I've been on a couple of the, if not 3 of the webinars where we've had members of the public come in as well. They haven't had huge numbers come, but there's been some good conversations and questions. So it's obviously helpful for those who have come along. Does sometimes feel a little bit plannerish, and by that I think it would be helpful as we're coming into the sort of close of this, asking for people to put in their thoughts. That actually the real nub of this is people saying to us what's of most value to them, what would they like to see, what perhaps has changed that they don't like, and what would they like to see, and how, if they can suggest how or how long it might be that they would be prepared to wait for certain changes and that type of thing. So you can sort of break it down to quite simple questions, and people can focus on their key topics. So but it's it's really great to see all that work, and I can see that the staff have put together some great webinars and slides and good information, and it is quite esoteric. This is that real early stage of getting sort of just ideas. So I suspect that the next stage, which is actually really quite soon, there'll be some really good engagement when we put together sort of options and sort of flesh it out, so people have got something to actually read and give their opinion on. So no, it's good. It's good to see it happening. Thank you.
Okay, Greg, Grant, Craig.
Kia ora, thanks. Yeah, just mine's in relation to the recent media engagement, and certainly I'm presuming after this report was written, it was actually very pleasing to see Environment Canterbury on the press, and certainly the TV1 News that I watched the other night, an element of being a provocateur, but also getting a very some key messages out there to the community, basically around that sort of Pūtea wizard. There's a lot on, but a lot of stuff being devolved down to regional and TAs. So where's that money going to come from? So long may opinions continue.
Thank you for that comment. And Craig and Grant. Craig.
Kia ora, Peter. Yeah, just wanted, picking up on the Future for Local Government report, and since our last meeting we had the Local Government NZ conference here in Mātaitai, Christchurch, and some good conversations had around Aotearoa and around the councils in terms of that. And I think one thing that's really clear to me, and hopefully a lot of us can agree on, is that the funding model for local government's a bit broken. And there's some really good recommendations in the report around that in terms of new funding models that could be produced, and including things like we heard about this morning in terms of the public forum presentation we had in terms of climate change, creating new funds around climate change, so that helps local government deal with those things. So I just think that's one thing that we can really get on board with, work with other councils and obviously the government to ensure those things get in place, because I think that helps our role a lot, whatever role that turns out being. But I think that can really help local government. And there's some really interesting stuff in there about representation and increasing democracy too, which we've heard from Councillor Swiggs. One of those recommendations about the 16-year-old voting might already be in the House. Wow. So that's happening. Yeah, so I just think there's some really good things in that report that we need to work with local government NZ, Tudu Kahika, is it? And local councils here. And I'm really glad we're going to be having those conversations coming up soon. So especially around what you said, Peter, about reorganisation, how does that look? Let's make sure whatever we design is something that we're all proud of and happy with.
Thank you. Genevieve.
I've just got a comment regarding the What's Our Future Canterbury campaign and how that's running. And I've directed a lot of people to the online survey and submission platform. But it does actually say in sort of the summary before people enter that it takes 20 minutes. Well, that is actually inaccurate. I've relayed this, so it's 20 minutes per section. So people have to be, if they're very time limited, they have to choose accordingly to what their preferences are. So I've relayed this on, and I think that is a hindrance in people wanting to fill in some of these documents and giving us our feedback, which we've got between now and December to really get the ball rolling. on what we need in the long-term plan and the plans to come. And if we reflect on what the city has done and a similar concept, they've made it very fun, and I've just completed it myself. So they give people a scorecard of like 100 points in which they can use. And each preference, they give so many credits, and they see the original credits going down, down, down. So they can redistribute the funding so that the 100 points equals funding. And they distribute it accordingly to what they really feel is essential for the environment or for the future of the city. And I think we've missed the point with this, sadly, and that was our chance to really get something right. And I feel that maybe council could have actually directed this a little bit better. I mean, sadly, I wouldn't want to do the survey myself based on that. It's a 90-minute process for most people. So I just think, have we got time to do a shortened version of it with the really key points in it that someone can just go tick, 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 a basic comment, send it off? I just thought I'd get that out there today because yeah, not many people are filling it in that I've been talking to.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. We'll have a conversation outside this meeting about that because this isn't a process that we can get comment from staff into. So sorry about that, but we will do that, Councillor Robinson. I don't think, do we need, yes, you.
Me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, on what's our future Canterbury, I just thought I'd mention that the group in Ashburton has been, I think they've held over 40 public meetings around the district and around the town to gauge people's opinion on what's our future and their views on what the RPS should reflect on around Ashburton. I know I think at least one of the meetings had over 80 people. I've only managed to get to a couple, and there were 50 or 60 at both of those meetings. So this hopefully will be a very good reflection on the Ashburton's community's view on where the regional policy statement should take us.
Yeah, and I should reflect on that also, and having a conversation with internally here about, I've been approached by the fact that maybe that community wants to come and talk to us. Don't know how that fits with what we're doing. We'll see, and we'll get back. I'll get back to that person in the next week or so. About.
I would have thought that it's probably appropriate to have that meeting.
Nick?
Someone told me this morning that they'll come to see you on Friday regarding that.
Are they?
You're wrong. Yeah, that's what I said to them.
Moved by Councillor Mackay, seconded by Councillor Pauling. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against, that's carried. Now we're going to put up an extension of time here because we're out of time in about 4 minutes. So an extension of time to get through PX, and then we're clear for the day. So we'll put that up first. Moved by Councillor Pauling, seconded by Councillor Ward, that we understanding orders weeks at least 30 minutes, but we won't take that amount of time. So all those in favour of that, please say aye. All those against, that's carried. So we need someone now to move that we can move into public excluded. Moved by Councillor Cramwell, seconded by Councillor Swiggs. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against, that's carried. So we'll not too sure who should be on the room, but we need out of the room, but we need to change screens, do we?
Yes.
So Vicky, we need to change screens. So you need to drop in and drop out. Okay, so we pretty much haven't got any whole of council business after we finish this meeting. If you have got a meeting planned, it's a smaller group, and I think maybe Transport has, I'm not sure on that. We can communicate. You communicate with the other councillors involved and see if you can move that around. Are you happy with that?
Sorry, was that aimed at me or generally?
Just things that you're involved in.
Yeah, I know that one thing I'm involved with, I've got a calendar invite for now. And oh yeah, we do have a thing. Yeah, I might actually be able to make it into the office. My son is still he's up and about, so I might come in the car a bit later.
Cool. The next, sorry, let's Let's get out of here. The next meeting of this council is on the 20th September 2023 at 10:30. Any changes to this time will be publicly notified. Greg.
Unahia, ki te uru tapu, nui a tānei. Kia wātia, kia māmā, kia nākau, te inana. Te wairua I te ara takata, hoia, rā rongo, whakairea, aki ki runga, kia tīna, tīna. Haumi ai, hui ai, tā I ki ai.